Don't forget.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are joining us from. Also, I would just like to say, first of all, please excuse if you hear barking in the background. It's my dog, but I've closed the door, but hopefully it's muffled a bit. So, yes. All right, so let's go ahead and get this party started. So today is all about restorative practices and restorative circles. Now, this is an intro, so just know it's not going to be how to actually put these into context and how to deliver these things, but this is just an overview of what they are, what they look like, what they sound like, what they feel like. Okay. Also, like Kevin, I want to do a land acknowledgement. I sit in Maryland, so we want to acknowledge the land on which we are learning, working, and gathering today is the ancestral home of the Yakamako and the Pukastue peoples. We also acknowledge that Maryland was partly built and sustained by enslaved people of African descent. Through this acknowledgement, we recognize that these communities and all those who have been displaced and enslaved through colonization. So, with that being said, just some friendly reminders as we are going throughout our session. So, try your best to stay engaged as much as possible. I know different time zones, we might be tired, we might be just waking up, we might need a nap. Totally understand. Also, expect to experience discomfort. Also, I want you to be able to speak your truth and expect and accept a lack of closure. All right. Okay. So let's begin. Well, before we begin, I just want you all to know, I do this like if we were in a classroom. This does not have to be a quiet space. If you have questions and concerns as I'm going, please feel free to ask, put in the chat, all of those things, okay? So don't please feel like that you have to wait until the end to hold anything it is that you are feeling or wanting to know. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is talk about holding space. So this means that we are willing to walk alongside another person in whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. Now, I know personally I have issues with the fixing them part, and all of us have issues with one of these things, and that is something that we have to work on. One of the most important things is being able to acknowledge the fact that I might need to be careful with how I'm making someone feel if they're feeling inadequate or trying to fix them or trying to impact their certain outcome. So when we hold space for one another, we must open our hearts, offer unconditional support, and let go of judgment and control. So let me go back over that one more time. When we hold space for other people, we want to open our hearts, offer unconditional support, and let go of judgment and control. And it's those last two parts that sometimes, well, as humans, are kind of the most difficult. It's that judgment and control bit. So, who is here? What I want you to take the time to do right now, if you haven't done so, change your name and preferred pronouns, if whatever you feel comfortable with. Your role and why you chose to participate today, and one question or wondering that you have. So again, who's all here? Your name, any preferred pronouns, your role and why you chose to participate today. And if you have one question or wondering that you have, I'll give you all some time to do that now. Abdul, we are recording, so yeah, don't worry about that. So again, for those who are just coming in, we are changing our name or putting whatever name we want to be called, any preferred pronouns, your role and why you chose to participate today, and one question or wondering that you have, and you can put those in the chat. Julie, thank you for your question. Christina, Dion, Rachel, some of these things I will be answering. And some of them will be done in a part 2 session. Okay, so I know that some of you all are probably still thinking about your questions or whatnot, and that's fine. So we will continue, and I'll continue to let you all put them in. I don't want you to think that, oh, I have to do this right now because yeah, that might be something that you really, really have to think about. What one question or wondering that you may have, and that's absolutely okay. And it's okay if you don't have any at the moment. So what we're gonna do is this reflection piece right here. What do you need to get the most from today's learning? What do you need to get the most from today's learning? So I want you to think about that. You don't have to share it with me, but whatever it is that you think that you may need to get the most from today's learning. And if I can help with any of that in any way. And some of those things might have been, or whatever the question that, or whatever it is that you may think that you need from today's training or today's learning, it might be answered as we're going forth, or it might also be in your questions that you've also asked from one of your questions or your wonderings. So our purpose. So our purpose for this session, still thinking about what you need to get the most from today's learning, is we're going to learn the main reasons for restorative practices and why they exist. I did see a question in there asking why it's moved from justice to practices. I will answer that when we're talking about the practices form, because that question, I think it is very important for us to discuss. One, learn the components that make up the restorative practice continuum, and then explore restorative circles. So the original concept of restorative practices come from Native people of North America and New Zealand. So First Nation communities of Aboriginal justice circles, healing circles. So that's in North America and New Zealand. So in the 1970s, the Mennonite communities of Ontario and Canada and Indiana in the US. And in 1989, New Zealand has made restorative practice their hub of entire justice system. Then in 1996, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa. So those are some backgrounds of where restorative practices come from. One of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we're honoring Indigenous practices when we're talking about restorative justice or restorative practices. One, this reflects ancient beliefs and practice of Indigenous peoples on many continents. So it's also building a community based on shared values and shared humanity. People in the community treat each other like relatives, where everyone belongs and everyone matters. The Indigenous model of restorative practices calls us to embody a restorative way of being by seeing all people as fully human and then uplifting their values and beliefs. So by doing this inner work, we see differently, we hear differently, and engage with others differently. Restorative practice is just that, a practice. A practice that we're all doing as we move through life. What we need to remember is that it's not a program. It should not be forced upon youth, children, adults, and or families. It's sustainable for all incidents of harm or crime. It's suitable for all incidents of harm or crime, and one shoe fits all. Every restorative practice session is unique, and we should not assume that it's for everyone. Any questions or concerns so far? You don't have to raise your hand. You can just speak up. You can unmute yourself. Okay, or let me check the chat. Okay. So let's look at the 5 R's of restorative practices. So we have relationship, respect, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. So, relationship. In restorative practices recognizes that when crime or conflict occurs, individuals and communities feel violated. Rather than reviewing wrongdoings as an offense against rules, laws, or authority, it recognizes that all communities, especially closed communities like schools and classrooms, are impacted. Respect. Respect is the key ingredient that holds the container for all restorative practices, and it is what keeps the process safe. It is essential that each person shows respect for others and for themselves. Responsibility. For restorative practices to be effective, personal responsibility must be taken. Everyone needs to be willing to accept responsibility for his, her, or their own action, their behavior, and choices. Repair. The restorative approach is to repair the harm that was done to the fullest extent possible, recognizing that harm may extend beyond anyone's capacity for repair. Repair should be built off an individual's capacity and strengths of the person who caused harm and be directly correlated with the effects of the offense. Reintegration. For the restorative process to be complete, persons who have caused harm may have felt alienated must be accepted back into the community. Now, I did have a question in the chat, and the question was, why is justice, quote unquote, justice being replaced with practices in this work? So it's not technically being replaced. They're interchangeable depending on what it is being used for. Justice, restorative justice, or RJ circles as it was originally called with some groups, was initially brought into with the juvenile system. So that's where the justice came from, to look at the justice of wrongdoing acts within the juvenile system. Because if we are working with participants or organizations that aren't technically in the juvenile system, we refer to them as practices, then we refer to them as restorative practices, restorative circles, instead of restorative justice. I hope that answered. Does that make that a little bit more clear? Yes, no, maybe so. Y'all are mighty quiet today. Okay, good. All right, great. I know that it's a hard pill to swallow. One thing that we also have to look at is the history. Oh, okay, you said you think that justice is implied in the discussion. Understand that's totally understandable. One of the things that I want us to be aware of is that when restorative justice or restorative practices were taken from indigenous peoples and put into Western society, most of these practices were done with brown and Black children. So therefore, the things that were talked about or the things that were done might not have always been done out of the goodness of people's heart, but also they were done in a way to keep this certain group feeling a certain way. So that's one reason why when I do restorative justice or restorative practices, especially with the global majority, I do not call it restorative justice. I call it restorative practices. So because of how it was taken, the original part of it was taken and then used almost sometimes in a negative light. I hope also that that helps with understanding of it as well. Yeah, it's hard. I'll be honest with you. It's, you know, sometimes you have to do a lot of switching up because um everybody wants justice. Everybody wants to feel justified. And as someone of the global majority, when I justice, okay, you're so welcome. When we think about justice, we think about something that is good for us, good, something that we deserve. But when it was taken out of the connotation of indigenous peoples as being something that was done for the good of them, to then being used with children of color who were put in who are put in certain areas as juvenile hall or prisons or anything of like that. We don't want to think of it justice that way. We still, so in order to be able to still keep the work going and to make sure that it's done in the way that it should be done, it's best if we use the words practices. Yes. Oh, Shireen, yes. That is a good point. So Sharina says Sharina acknowledged the fact that it reminds of how anti-racism is turning into access, into action in IDA work. And I totally agree. One of the things, and Kevin and I were just talking about this before you all hopped on, is that a lot of people like to say, oh, I'm doing this anti-racist work. But I always say that you can be anti-racist and anti-Black at the same time. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So that's what I want you all to think about when we're thinking about restorative practices. How can we take this work, the onset of it, and what it was intended to do, where people have taken it, and sometimes where it looks, and also think about where we're using this. A lot of the times, restorative practices are being used in the schools, whether they're being used properly or not. And then look at our schools, look at our shape of schools, how they're created, the things that we think about, because also we have an issue with the school to prison pipeline, no matter where in the world we are, which is what we're thinking about and talking about. Oh, Abdul, thank you for asking that. So I will talk about a couple of things, but I think we'll have to discuss that in session 2, where we're talking about using restorative practices in different areas. Because honestly, being that I did use it when I was living and working in Nigeria, it looks and sounds different because of cultural aspects. So how you might use restorative practices in the US is going to be totally different than how you use it in the Caribbean, how you use it in Europe, how you use it in Central and South America, how you use it on the continent. It looks and sounds totally different because of a cultural aspect. And that's one thing that we need to learn, know, and understand. Because if we're restoring something, we also need to be able to understand, yes, Dion, very situationally specific, that these practices that we are using, that we introduce, we need to make sure that they're culturally relevant to the demographics that it is that we're working with. We can't say that we're bringing this or we want to use this and we're working with different students in a global entity and have a Western mentality of it, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. So with that, a brief introduction of thinking about restorative conversations. So with this, the goal of restorative conversations is so that you're addressing a specific incident. So mind you, you come in, you're not talking about everything. You're just talking about a specific incident. It also focuses on impacts, repairing relationships, and reintegrating into the community. Then we have to also think about the restorative questions and what they focus on when we are having these conversations. What happened? Who was affected by it and how? What is needed to make things right? What part of this situation can you take responsibility for? And how can we best use your strength? These are very important conversations. You know, usually think about it when you were a child. A lot of times if you did something to somebody, and sometimes they still do it, somebody says, you need to go apologize. Apologize for what? Or you need to go say, I'm sorry. Say, I'm sorry for what? Because a lot of times people aren't sorry. You're making somebody apologize or say sorry for, and they don't feel like they've done anything wrong. They don't understand the harm that they may or may have not caused. So it requires a conversation so that people understand what has taken place. One of the things to note, and this is a very special note, is that restorative conversations are not designed to address long-term, ongoing conflicts within a relationship. They are more constructed conflict models, usually with a non-biased facilitator. Should be implemented if more than one incident of harm needs to be addressed. So you need somebody who's non-biased to be helping you have these conversations, and somebody who you know and can trust that outside of that room, that it's not taken. Anything that's done there actually stays there so that things can be restored. Okay, I have a good question here, Jarrell. Thank you. So Jarrell is asking, how can staff members who have been harmed by students or men benefit from restorative practices? So first of all, your school counselors and someone, it would be great if they were trained in restorative practices. One, I am a trainer in restorative practices. I've been trained in restorative practices. Restorative practices can be used for every and anyone. So whether it's student to teacher, teacher to student, staff to staff, it doesn't matter. Anyone at the school can use it. Non-teaching staff to teaching staff, anybody should be using it. So, and how they can benefit means it is that they're having these open and honest conversations where they are discussing how they feel and what happened. And that's one thing about restorative practices. There are specific questions that are asked and are asked, so that when you're talking, because a lot of times, think about it, when you're upset, sometimes you deviate and you want to talk about everything. We have certain questions so that we can get to the heart and the core of the matter, so that whatever the harm has been done can be addressed. Your next question, Jarrell, what conditions need to be in place for school boards or admin to make this happen? This needs to be done across the board. So in order for school boards or admin to have this happen, or to even have everybody needs to take the training about why it needs to be happening. And so that it can be done efficiently and appropriately. What happens when there is no authentic support when there's no authentic support, then it runs amok. I was talking to one of my students, matter of fact, my elementary STEM educators. He was talking about how they have someone in the school who's trained in restorative practices, who leads restorative practices, but every time it's done, he gives more harm to the students because his mentality is still that of bias and still that of being very accusatory of the students. So if there is no authentic support for these practices, or if it's not done properly, then you still have people who are left hurt and there is nothing that's been done. Christina. Yes, you can, because there are various versions of or organizations that do restorative practices. And what I'll do is I will come up with a list of organizations that train and whatnot. I don't know. What I will say, it's hard for the ones that I know. Most of them don't have a international or global stance on it. So it's very hard. Now, if you've had somebody trained within restorative practices, such as myself, who has lived abroad and worked in international school, it looks and sounds a whole lot different. Yes, yes. And that's why you find the issue with those not being able to have power in relation to race, sexuality, gender, and etc. I experienced that myself when I was doing my a follow-up training, because the trainer that was there, she just started off all wrong. She did not care to acknowledge how to pronounce people's names. One of my coworkers, she was first generation American Indian descent, and she just left class, and instead of during COVID, teachers did whatever to make sure that their students were involved. Well, one of the emojis that she had on her head in her Zoom was a pizza. So instead of asking her how to pronounce her name, she called her Pizza Hat Girl the whole time. Now, this is supposed to be somebody who is trained and is training in restorative practices. So yes, you're absolutely correct. Shireen, I will discuss with Kevin to do that. All right. Now that we've just talked conversation, let's change it and talk about the circles. So circles are the most distinctive and flexible forms of restorative practices, because depending on where you are, they can look totally different. So when I was living in San Jose and I would visit some of the students' classrooms, because a lot of them were Hispanic, whether it's being, or Latinx, whether it's being from Mexico itself or being from South America, that principal at that school, he had talking drums. And so he would actually have the talking drums that teachers would have their own in their classroom. He taught them how to use, the teachers to use the talking drums. So it would make the circle more authentic due to Aboriginal people. Also, circles are very effective as a proactive process for building a social capital and creating class norms. So here's something that I tell people all the time. You know, if you want your classroom or your school to be culturally relevant, you need to start with culture. You need to bring culture within any aspect of what it is that you're doing. So if you're building a classroom with culture, one of those cultural norms, and before we used to call them morning meetings or family meetings. This could be, you don't have to say we're going to have circle time or we're going to have a restorative practice circle. You can still keep the name family meeting, circle time, morning meetings, and this be the process that you're doing. I know some teachers, if they had like a home room and they came at the end, their exit ticket, the process of their exit ticket was creating an exit circle and talking about what happened during the day. Also, most common way to do the circle is arranging students in chairs in a circle, or whomever it is that's doing the circle. So it can be, doesn't have to be just students. It can be adults or whoever is participating. Ask a question and have students respond by in turn going around the circle. It helps to have a talking piece so that people know that when I have this talking piece, it is my turn to speak and I'm not interrupted. This is important because you should have active listening. So therefore, the person who is talking, they are not interrupted. And they are in control of that time to be able to talk. A benefit of the go-around strategy is that it allows quieter students the opportunity, or people, the opportunity to be heard without having to compete with more assertive people. So we know there's always someone in the group who is a talker, and who always has something to say. And nothing's wrong with that. But then you have people who maybe something may be on their heart. If they want to talk, it gives them the opportunity to be able to do so. Also, you shouldn't force people to talk if they're not ready. So you're able to pass. If you don't feel comfortable at that time, or you don't have anything to share, you should not be forced to. Meredith, you've heard some intentionally change their phrasing from restorative practice to reparative practices. Would you share your thoughts? Reparative practices. I don't know. You know, I can understand why. I have not come across anyone who has done so, but I could understand why they would, because we're thinking about reparations. So when you're hurt or you're harmed, you want the reparations. You want what has been taken from you, and you want the acknowledgement of the harm that has been done. So I agree with it. If it works, and that's what a group decides that they want to call it, it's still technically the same thing, because the same work that's done with restorative practices still has to be done. The same line of questioning, the same line of everything, it still has to take place. But I like reparative practices. It makes sense to me. So I'm not opposed to using that at all. Okay. You're welcome. Okay, one concern. Okay, Cherie, one concern I have is the potential for harm by attempts where all parties lack awareness of what they don't know. The tendency of Westerners to mangle and distort Indigenous practices has a long history. How do we ensure that we take our time by making sure that we have prerequisites in place before charging ahead? So, because of this one thing, Cherie, I went through my training with with somebody who was indigenous to the as far as Native American, to do my training. And I think that's very important. Because I see the difference in the training that I did when someone who is a non-person of color who gives the training. A lot of times people are have the right mindset, or they're coming from a place where they don't want to give harm, but a lot of times harm is ensued and not understood, hence my example from before. Just like with DEI strategies, or Jedi, or whatever the term that you want to use for your school or organization, it takes time. So none of this should be rushed. There should be things put into place. If restorative practices is something that's going to be used within your organization, it should start from the head. So the training should start from the top. Leadership needs to be trained before we can decide, oh, we want to put this into classrooms or anything of that such. Yeah, I agree. Every time a non-Indigenous restorative justice practitioner is doing it, I think we should speak up. I know I did. And so here's what happened in that story at the end. So a coworker had on a shirt that very controversial, but I loved it. Now, mind you, the trainer said she's not checking the chats like how I'm doing it, answering questions. She's not checking the chat. Everybody else was chatting in the box who was a non-person of color. And I saw his shirt. He had an all black shirt on with white letters on if he had a pocket, it would be on the pocket side, and it said, "Kill your masters." I thought it was great. So in the chat, I put, "Hey, so-and-so, I love your shirt." His response to me was, "Thanks, Marla." That was it. No further conversation ensued. The lady who was doing the training stopped what she was doing and turned off the chat function, and then said, if you're going to have personal conversations on the chat, which she said she wasn't checking, you all need to do that via text message. Yeah. So therefore, on break, I called my one of the supervisors or admin that had brought her on. And I told her, yeah, I'm not coming back because of what just took place. And if you allow her to come back, I'm quitting today. And she was like, okay, I totally understand what you're saying. And her next question to me is, what would you like to happen? And I said, you need to fire her right now because I don't feel safe. And I'm glad I had somebody who understood the place I was coming from. And she said, absolutely. So while on break, she called the lady and she was fired. Now, that's not going to happen for everybody, but it happened for me because one, it's a group of probably 20 other people who are either being retrained or getting their first training on restorative practices, and a restorative practice wasn't done. Yeah. So for me, I agree. It's really hard to take something from someone who initially does not come from a place of not harming. And of course, afterwards, we have restorative circles and to talk about what happened after the lady was fired. We are gonna go, and I know that was real random, or maybe not. We're going to go in a breakout room. If Kevin, could you do some breakout rooms for me? Probably no more than 5 in a group. What we're gonna do is reflecting on and honoring Indigenous practices, the soul believing, which is if you see here, which is morale, the head thinking, which is intellectual, the heart, which is feeling, emotional, hands and feet, which is acting, relational. In our breakout rooms, please share anything that at this moment that has stood out for you as being important. And then we will come back and share. I'll probably take 2 or 3 people to share out as a whole group. As you see, there is 8 minutes on the timer. I won't start the timer until everyone is in their perspective breakout rooms, but I will stop sharing my screen right now. Let me put what I said in the chat so you have all of that information, so you're not trying to remember everything that I just said to you. So let me put that in the chat right now. Karina, I love it. Restorative practices. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Kevin, do we have the groups created?
Yep, they're open now.
Okay. And 8 minutes will start when everyone has gotten to their groups. Yay! Yay! Welcome back, everybody. Hey, I hope you all had great discussions. I will take three people to share, and I'm going to mute myself.
I just wanted to shout out Sherry in facilitating the conversation, leading the conversation in ways that was kind of like, okay, great, I'm encouraged to share and participate. And I think even just implementing some of the practices or framework that we just reviewed. I'm just noticing that now, like, oh yeah, it's in practice. But I think there's one thing that Sherry brought up around like these conversations not being the end all be all, not the answer to everything, like sometimes organizations or individuals will think they are. And it even inspired in me and recognizing how some of these spaces, especially in the corporate spaces, folks want to build community, they want to have these restorative practices without the needs, maybe even saying intrinsic needs being met. Therefore, it's a barrier to whatever conversation that folks would like to have.
Okay, I guess we'll go with one. Because I'm not gonna force anyone to talk, because I know sometimes it's like this is a bit much. It can be a bit overwhelming. So we'll go with the one. Thank you so very much. Sherry is absolutely correct. Because just because you say that, okay, we're going to have, it's similar to places creating DEI statements. Like, because we say that we're going to do this does not mean that it's done properly. And again, as I was saying before, when it's not done the right way, you're still inflicting additional harm. So organizations, no matter whether they're corporate or schools, need to go with the intent of, okay, well, we've already harmed people. So we need to figure out how we're going to restore what it is that we've already broken, and then continuing with the restoration process. Because if you don't, then you're just piling on more garbage on top of garbage, or spraying perfume on top of garbage, which, still stinks. As Outcast says, roses still smell like boo-boo. Julie, are you laughing at me?
I mean, you got to bring some Outcasts. This is why I showed up. This is just Marla. Love her.
Hey, I'm just saying. And one day I really had to smell a rose, and I was like, they don't smell too nice. They might do it. They might do a good job of doing other health benefit stuff, but they don't really smell too nice. Not like I thought they would smell. So, hey, here we go. All right. So I'm gonna move on. Let me go ahead and share back my screen with you all. So I had you all look at this, and this It's not a square, it's a circle. Yay. So imagine that you are in a conflict with a person who is important in your life. What values do you want to guide your conduct as you work out that conflict, and why? One more time. Imagine that you are in conflict with a person who is important in your life. What values do you want to guide your conduct as you work out that conflict, and why? You can either share in the chat or you can come off mute. And for me, let me go ahead and I'll go first. For those who don't know, got recently married last year June, so it'll be a year this June. And if I'm thinking about my husband and if we've had conflict, I want for me the driving force to be that heart, that feeling, that emotional. Because I know that anything that could be said could be harmful and hurt, and you can't take things back once they're out in the atmosphere. Like when they're out there, when it's out there, it's just out there. So I have to, as my brother says, I don't think before I talk sometimes. And my mom says that, she's a psychologist. She says it's because I'm an extroverted person. So my brain is going so fast. So by the time I've already said or done anything, it's after the fact that I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, oh, well, whatever, it's already said or done. I can't do anything about it. So I have to remember when I'm talking or when I've had conflict, that I'm thinking about the feelings or the emotional or the heart of the matter with everything. That's just me. Anyone else would like to share? Okay, if that person's important to me, I'll meet them where they're at. Okay. I like that one. Anyone else? Heart and soul, love, humanity, humility, and respect. Yep. Yeah. So I want you all, as you're going to think about this, as you might be going through your own personal conflicts or anything that you're going on within your journey, it's that these 4 parts of the circle. Think about it's not the north, south, east, and west, and it's not technically north south because we're here in the northeast, and so we're right here at the corner parts, or not corner parts, but in the middle parts of the compass. So if we're thinking about this, think about this compass here and what values you want to guide your conduct as you work out any conflict with anyone. Okay. All right. So let's think. Think of a time when you experience working with a team and where where there was high trust. One more time. Think about a time when you experienced working with a team where there was high trust. What were you doing? What did you see happening? What did you hear people saying? And how did you feel? I'm gonna put that in here in the chat. Again, what were you doing? What did you see happening? What did you hear people saying? And how did you feel? Kevin, if you can do me a favor and do the breakout groups again with me, for me, with new groups. And this time we'll do 5 minutes because we'll do 8 minutes again. I'll give you all 8 minutes again so you all could actually have some genuine conversation, or as much as possible. Again, so what you're doing is think about a time when you experienced working with a team where there was high trust. What were you doing? What did you see happening? What did you hear people saying? And how did you feel? Okay. I don't know if I need to do breakout.
Rooms are open.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so I asked 4 questions to the think part. Think of a time when you were when you experienced working with a team where there was high trust. 4 questions. What were you doing? What did you see happening? What did you hear people saying? And how did you feel? If I could get those who would like to share one of those 4 questions, just one.
I'll go. It felt, what I said is it felt like 3 things. It felt like freedom. It felt like I could be myself, and it felt like really good and warm, you know? Like I could exhale. That's what it felt like. So those 3 things.
It's that exhaling part that's very important. I like that. I'm glad you felt that way. Very glad you felt that way. Anyone else?
I heard lots of affirmation in my team. Hi, Meredith.
Affirmation, that's good. You know, it doesn't matter what people say. We like being affirmed. We like being know that we're recognized. I see you. I see what you're doing, and I see how great you're doing those things. Like affirmation is great. Anyone else would like to share? Okay. So let's go to the last part. And as we're wrapping up today, this evening, whatever the case may be, I want you all to think about these 3 things. One thing that I want you all to remember is that we are stronger together because of the experiences and expertise of this community. Holding common spaces for diverse voices is a simple way of nurture innovation culture across systems. By communicating openly and regularly about our wobbles, our success, our questions, our ideas, we will come through shared challenges with greater learnings and insights. So as you go forth today and tomorrow, this is your call of action, and what will be your do? And you don't have to share with me. This is just something I want you to think about and internalize for yourself. 3 things. What is one key learning from today? What will you do more of and what will you do less of? And how can you bring this information forward? Again, what is one key learning from this session? What will you do more of and what will you do less of? And how can you bring this information forward? I know that we weren't able, again, it's a lot to this. But Kevin and I just wanted to do more so an introduction so that we have a foundation of where to start. In the meantime, in between time of us planning a next session, you can ask me anything. As Kim Possible says, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. My number is here, my email is here, and this is where you can find me: Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Oh, Sherry, thank you for sharing your one key learning. Yes, holding space is very important. And before we go, did anyone have any specific questions or concerns that you wanted to address with me? You're welcome, Julie. Well, if that is it. Oh, Meredith, not a question. Just hope that there will be many more sessions like this. Yes, that is the intention. This is not, if you know me, I don't do one and done type sessions. I like to continue with the learning. So yeah, this is not, we did this and now we're done with it. No, this is a continuation. Okay. And just like that, we're done for today. Thank you all so much for coming.
All right, let's get some virtual love. Thank you, Marla, so much. Thank you all for showing up. And that recording, we add it and share it out. And we look forward to future sessions. So be on the lookout for other sessions for folks that need it. So we appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Okay. Kevin, could you not close it so soon just in case some people want to hang back?